I was up in the mountains last week of North Carolina, and we had some cold weather up there. I think it was down to 5 degrees, 8 degrees, 30 for a high on a couple of days. I said, man, I can't wait to get back home so to warm up. I come back, it's 30 degrees. I'm like, whew. So maybe, maybe I did. I don't know, but hopefully, but I tell you, it feels colder out there than it did up there at 5 degrees. Of course, we went sledding that day. There was no wind. Sun was out. The sky was blue. It was gorgeous. I wasn't overly dressed, I didn't think. Very, very comfortable. I come home now, and man, it's like, woo. And something else I discovered about reaching senior citizen age is we went sledding, and my rear end is sore. Never had that problem before. I got up the next day and I'm like, man, what's going on back here? So I said, well, maybe it's just me. Went out again the next day, to try to make it get better, and it didn't hurt any worse. But I was just like, that's amazing. How? Never had that problem before. So I guess it comes with age. I don't know. It is good to be back. And we're going to be talking about self-control today. Maybe I needed to use a little bit of that when I was having such a good time. And I left my glasses in my wife's purse, so I hope I'll be able to read this for you, or at least check my notes good enough. An interesting fact, a little trivia question, or a little fact in case they ask this in one of your trivia games. Do you know that the word self-control doesn't appear in the King James Version? Think they'll work?
I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, good. That it is not in the King James Version. Did you know that? I didn't either. And the reason because the first, I guess, documentation we have of that word comes in about 1711. And I think that's about 100 years after the King James was written. But we don't get off that easy. They just use different words. And the concept is there in both the Old and the New Testament. And they use words such as, wow, I don't know if I can even wear these, temperance in 2 Peter 1:6, sober in 1 Thessalonians 5:8, discreet in Titus 2:5, and sober-minded in Titus 2:6. So even though the word actually isn't in there, they use some other English words to translate the Greek and the Hebrew. And in some of the later editions, they came up with self-control. But there's a little trivia question for you. If anybody ever asks you, or you can ask them. Here's how Merriam-Webster defines it. Actually, I like this. It says that the English word means restraint exercised over one's own impulses, emotions, or desires. Restraint exercised over our impulses. I think about impulse, I've always heard of impulse buyers. I think my brother-in-law might be one of those. Goes out and sees something, he's got to have it right then. Restraint exercised over our emotions goes a little deeper. Our emotions, how hard they are to control, our anger, and other things like that. Then it kind of goes even deeper, exercised over our desires. See, our emotions we kind of see, our emotions are kind of outward and we can kind of read emotions, but your desires, I've got no idea about your desires, what you're thinking. Thinking, man, how long we got in this class? It's probably what you're thinking, but no, I have no idea what your desires are. They could be worthwhile. They may not be so good. So when you think about that restraint, exercised over our impulses, emotions, and desires. And the thing about people that use self-control, they don't need anybody to tell them. They don't need a parent. They don't need a sheriff. They don't need anybody out there telling them to use their self-control. And that's because they have dedicated themselves to behave according to their spiritual and moral values. They choose to follow their values. And that's what we do with Christianity, do we not? We choose to either obey or we choose not to obey. And one thing I like about that, there's no middle ground. You choose or you don't choose. You're in the saved realm or you're in the condemned realm. No middle ground. See, I think we like to operate in the gray area a lot of times, especially when it comes to self-control. And it seems like we like to leave our consciences out, like they take a vacation when we talk about self-control. And when those go out the window, all kinds of stuff happens. So I'd like to talk, it was kind of interesting when Pete asked me to do this. I said, man, that's a wide subject, self-control, all the things that we can use self-control over or is involved in our life. So it may just be a rambling of several different ideas I have. I don't know, we'll go with it, but I got some things I'd like to discuss with you today about self-control. And another idea I want to put out there before we get started is self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul mentions in Galatians chapter 5. And I want to talk just for a minute about how we develop those attributes, those characteristics. And I want to just, let me see what verse that is. I think it's 25 or 26. I just want to be sure. It's in verse 25. It says, if we live by the Spirit, let's follow the Spirit as well. And it's something we don't really talk about, and I don't really want to get into a whole bunch of that today, is how the Holy Spirit works in our lives. We know the days of the miraculous age are over, but there's still some indwelling that we have of the Holy Spirit. And I think when we develop these fruits of the Spirit, it's something that we need help with. When we study, when we dedicate ourselves to the Word of God, and the indwelling of the Spirit helps us to come to remembrance of things to help us with our self-control, love, patience, and so on and so forth. So it's not something that we're going to do on our own. We need some help, brother. We need some help with this. And that's why I just want to kind of bring that to your attention, because we don't really talk about a lot. There's not a lot said about how it's involved in our lives, and there's a couple of different things. I was out on the road and a guy just missed me. Was that my guardian angel, or was that just luck? I'm not going to get into all that. But I can tell you, I don't think we have guardian angels. Are there ministering spirits out there? Yes, there are. How they work, I'm not exactly sure. And maybe we don't need to know. So that's just something else I want to put out there, that we do need some help in this. And I'm going to start off on the negative this morning. Let's think about lack of self-control and what that means in our lives and how that works. I'm going to read a partial list here of things that stem from lack of self-control. Wars and rumors of wars, drug and alcohol addictions, domestic violence, all forms of abuse, physical, mental, emotional, sexual, verbal, broken homes, abortions, abandoned and neglected children, bullying, unsafe neighborhoods, road rage, mass killings, sexual immorality of every kind, racism, government corruption, greed, gluttony, lying, cheating. And I got to stop there. You get the idea. List just goes on and on. And if you look, you think about all the good news that we have on TV that are they're so quick to give us every day of what's going on and what's disasters in our country. And if you really get to the bottom of that, it's a lack of self-control. It's a lack of self-control. Somebody or some group has left their conscience, and I'm sure, everybody's not raised the same, and I'm not making excuses, but I don't see how anybody could go out and do a mass shooting and not have any conscience about it. I mean, how can you just go out and randomly shoot people? I don't get it. Now, I don't know, maybe they're wired different. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any degrees in psychology, okay? And if I did do any studying, it's been, 50-year reunion. 50-year reunion will be this year. So it's been a long time. And whatever I knew, I forgot, I can guarantee you. But a lot of these things, I just don't understand how people can operate and do some of the things they do. But I think it comes back to this idea of self-control or lack of self-control. And it's sad. Civility in our country, look, it's fading right before our eyes. And most of you in here are close to my age, and you think about how things were when we were young. It's a different country. We didn't lock our doors, much less our cars. We could walk around the street, neighborhood, any time of day or night. Didn't worry about it. Now, we lock everything. We even lock our phones. Can't go anywhere. It's fading. Lack of self-control. Lack of self-control. Right before our very eyes. And then we wonder why that a lot of the countries call us and the other Western countries the Great Satan. Well, why would they call us? What's wrong with us? We got the greatest country in the world. How can we be the Great Satan? Well, maybe they see things a little different. Maybe they're watching our same news. So all they get's the bad. There's still lots of good. I hope and I pray and I know there's lots of good folks left. I'm looking at a bunch of you right now. We still got good people here, But good things don't make the news. But there is a lack of self-control, basically, from the top down. Think about our government, how they work, and all their pork barrels and all the things they got. I'll vote for you and you do for me. And they don't really worry about us anymore. They don't worry about us. They worry about themselves, And I'm positive when the Congress first started, those guys didn't go up there and make a living in Washington. They went up there for a few months out of the year, got things squared away, and came back home, went back to work. Now we got guys and gals that live up there, homes, that's their job. And they'll do anything. And you talk about slandering and how nasty are our elections. Man, the mudslinging and the stuff that goes on. Anyway, I don't want to get on my soapbox. Let me move along here. You get the picture. You get the picture. And one last note, in 2 Timothy 3, in the first couple of verses there, Paul says that people in the last days will become heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit. And here's, I think, the key: lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people. See, and I think that lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, I think that sums it up. Because when you get back to your core values, if you use self-control, then that takes you out of lovers of pleasure. Not that we don't have fun, not that we don't do things pleasurable, but we keep all that in check. If you continue to keep God first, and I think that's a problem that maybe a stereotype of Christians is you guys don't have any fun. Y'all are boring. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. Well, I don't see it that way. We have fellowship. We get together. We do fun things. We have a blast. No, do we go down to bars and sit there and get loaded? No. We don't do that. Do we put other things first in front of God? Hopefully not. I love football. Well, I'm not going to go down to the game and miss church. Well, we're not in the playoffs, so it don't matter. But I love sports. I love a lot of things. But we keep it in check. See? So it's not like we are boring. It's not like we don't have any fun. But we don't have fun according to the world, see, and that's the difference. See, they're all about partying. They're all about grabbing all the gusto and all the things that go with it. And we don't participate in that. Therefore, you guys ain't no fun. But I wholeheartedly disagree. We do have fun. Let me ask you a question. What is the greatest invention or innovation? What do you think is one of the greatest inventions? I'll throw out a couple of cliches. Well, that's the best thing created since sliced bread. Printing press. That's a good one. How about the wheel? Where would we be without the wheel? Was it? Okay, there we go. The Bible was the first thing on the printing press. That's awesome. What about antibiotics? Automobiles. Internet. And I know most of you can remember here. I know y'all remember before cell phones. Can you remember that far back? What did we do? You call and, well, yeah, they did have answering machines. And then we got the, what's that little? Beeper. Then we got to the beepers, and you hear beep, beep, beep. Oh, get out and get your phone and go call. And then we got the first phone, the first cell phone. That's all it was. It was just a phone. And now, everything in the world is on our phones. And I would say that this is almost necessary in our lives. You lose it, what do you do? Oh man, it's not that it costs $1,500 to replace. It's just, oh man, everything's on my password's on my phone. This is on there, that's on there, my accounts. Oh, somebody may hack in there. Oh boy. And you go to the restaurants. And this is one of the problems I think is wrong with our families. You go to the restaurant, what's everybody doing? Nobody's talking. Nobody's paying attention. Let me get that out of there before it rings. Eh? Lack of self-control, folks. Lack of self-control. And one of the funny things about when my mom and dad bought a house up in the mountains, it was in the valley, so there was no internet. There was a landline. Cell phones didn't work. So we went up there. Man, we had to play cards. We had to play board games. We had to sit around the table and eat without being interrupted. Terrible, terrible thing. Terrible thing. And I remember getting on my cell phone, and it wouldn't get in until I almost got back into town. I said, bling, bling, and your phone lights up. Oh, what did I miss? Really nothing. How did I get off on this? I think this was an old article. He had on there the TV remote control. And you do think about it, it is important. I don't think we can probably even turn our TVs on without a remote control today. I don't think they have the power buttons on them anymore. You can change channels, mute, control the DVR. So whoever's got the remote control holds a lot of power. I don't want to watch that. Sorry, I got a remote control. Now, what I'm waiting on is them to have a remote control for people. You got somebody over there just babbling, beep, mute. Got a bad attitude, beep, change their attitude. Terrible outlook, beep. Maybe put them to sleep. Wake up. But really, when you stop and think about that, that's kind of boring. I mean, not that we thrive on strife or anything like that, but we do like differences of opinions. I mean, if everything went my way, we'd really have a pretty good world, But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, if we had that kind of control, where did the diversity come from? Where were differences of opinion? I don't have all the best ideas, but if I had a remote control, I'd be in control of everything. But it doesn't work that way. God doesn't call us to be in control of other people. He calls us to be in control of ourselves. Let's look at 1 Timothy 4:16 real quick. And it says there, pay close attention to yourselves and to the teaching. Persevere in these things, for as you do this, you will save both yourself and those who hear you. So he's telling Timothy here to exercise some self-control, especially with him being a preacher, and you're out here preaching and you're not living like you're preaching. It ain't going to work. How many of you have been out talking to other people about coming to church? They say, oh, there's just a bunch of hypocrites down there. Well, I always say, well, the church isn't all that. The church is a hospital for sinners. We're all sinners. Yes, now being hypocritical is not a good thing. I'm not taking up for hypocrites. But we all sin. If there's any perfect, I'd like for you to stand up. I'm glad nobody stood up. But let me tell you something, though. That's where the blood of Christ comes in. God sees us as perfect. He sees us as without sin, thanks to the blood of His Son. So in a sense, even though we ourselves aren't perfect, the blood of Christ makes us that way. Because if we stand before God and we have any sin, He can't tolerate sin. But that's what's so great about the blood of Christ. See? Washes away, keeps us clean. Now, does that mean that we'll never achieve perfection? If you're trying to achieve perfection, it ain't going to happen. But that don't mean we cannot try. Brethren, our life depends on whether we strive to be more like Christ or we don't. And Christ was perfect. That's our goal. But we as humans will never reach that part in our lives where we don't sin. See? But that don't keep us from trying. And that's what, living faithfully is all about. Are we trying? Are we continue trying to be more like Christ? Are we trying to have him in our lives? Are we trying to have him as our example and let others see Christ living in us? Are we going to be perfect at that? Are we going to mess that up? More than once. But if we continue to try. Oh boy, here comes a good one. What a great time of the year to be talking about this. I'm going to talk about food. Think about food and the necessity of it in our lives. We got to eat. And I blame God because he makes it taste so good. Think about it. That's why we eat. That's one, not only because it's life-sustaining, but it tastes so good. Just think about it. If it didn't taste good, none of us have a problem with overeating because we wouldn't be eating it. But man, that second piece of pie. Ooh, give me that big piece of cake. And this is coming from a baker who worked 40 years in the bakery business. Give me that eclair. And there's nothing wrong with food, folks. We got to have it. But this is where self-control comes in. There are foods out there that aren't good for us. There's foods out there that we really don't need to be eating too much of. But it just tastes so good. And this time of the year, what do we hear? All the gym memberships are on the TV. You join right now, we give you your first 3 months free. All the new fads of the diets are out. Why? Because it's hard not to put on a few pounds in the holidays because it's so good. And I have to admit, there's stuff that I'll eat in the holidays. I won't eat the rest of the year. Little Buckeyes, that's like, and whoever made chocolate and peanut butter and put them together, I'd just like to hug them if I ever met them. I don't know who did it, but chocolate and peanut butter together. But anyway, I eat these things called Buckeyes. They're the little peanut butter, and you get some powdered sugar, and you roll them up and make them a little firm, and you dip them in chocolate, and you leave the little top part, if you've ever seen a Buckeye. Oh, man, they're good. Only eat them this time of year. Think about peanut brittle and things like that, all the little stuff that we have at holiday season. 2 big feasts right in a row, Thanksgiving. 4 or 5 weeks later, Christmas. That's what my tummy sounds like when it eats too much. And we overindulge. When is the last time you've heard a sermon on gluttony? I don't know if I've ever heard a sermon on gluttony. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times. And I'm not up here to bash folks. I'm not up here, any of that. I'm just talking about self-control and how easy and how difficult it is to administer, to practice self-control. And I just thought this would be a great subject because we just come out of the holidays, and I know I put on a few pounds, and I hope I'm not alone. And we do things. We do things this time of year to try to get rid of some of that stuff we had at Christmas. But food. And you think about Jesus in Matthew chapter 4. He went 40 days without eating. And what was the first temptation that Satan hit him with when he come out of the desert? Turn the bread. If you're the Son of God, turn this bread into stone. Turn the stone into bread. Man, 40 days. Let me ask you, what if you had been fasting for 40 days? You come out and I'm standing there, got a big pizza, big old one of them mountain-sized cheeseburgers they got up there, Darren, you know what I'm talking about? Like, big old hamburger. Ain't eaten 40 days. Oh, how about a pizza? Here's the catch, though. Going to exchange this for your soul. 40 days now without eating. Could you do it? You're drooling. I ain't eating 40. Oh, look at it. You're smelling it. Oh, that smells so good. You say, well, that's preposterous. Jacob and Esau, did that not happen? He come in, he was famished. Jacob said, here, have a little soup. Well, I might as well, I'm going to die anyway. Gave up his birthright. So is it that far-fetched? Could we do it? And you think about Jesus, how much self-control he had. And I think sometimes, oh, well, he was God. He could do it. But, he was still human. I imagine his belly was growling something fierce. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. And Paul also talks in 1 Corinthians 9:25 about the athletes and how they train to win the prize. We're in a race. Our goal is heaven. And you think about it, y'all remember, I don't even know what year the Olympics were, Eric Heiden, he was an ice skater. And I think he won like 5 gold medals that year. He was awesome. And they had, I remember the commentators talking about it, said, well, they got now what they call the Heiden effect. They know they can't beat him, but they can just keep up with him. They know they're going to place. I mean, he was that good. And they did an interview after his victories, and they said, what are you going to do now? He says, man, I'm going out with my friends. Why? Practice, 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 practice every single day, all the time, to achieve his goal. What's it going to take for us to get to heaven? Practice, 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 every day to get to heaven. See, we need to use delayed gratification. That's probably the biggest word I know. See? Give up some self-denial today so that we'll reach our goal to heaven one day. That's where we want to go. But it takes practice, 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 practice every day. Satan never quits. Satan never sleeps. And just as he knew where Jesus might be weak, guess what? He knows our weakness. And where do you think he's going to tempt you? I don't have a problem with using foul language, so he's not going to tempt me with foul language. But if I had a trouble, what do you think? Somebody come up, oh yeah, what am I going to do? Right back. And that's how he works. Whatever our shortcomings are, which mine are probably not yours, and yours are probably not mine, but he's going to come and attack us in those areas where we're weak. I'll get with Elizabeth here. But that's the idea of it, brethren. We have to practice, practice, practice every day. It's not just a Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night religion. When we go out tomorrow in the world, we don't leave well, I'm sitting over here, my Christianity right there on my chair. Okay? It's something we do all the time. Elizabeth.
Brother Kovar, I thought about what you just said earlier, and sometimes the discipline begins by not putting ourselves in those positions. Not the action. We may not commit the act, but sometimes we put ourselves in environments or situations.
That's correct.
That could make us sin.
Yep.
And I was happen to think about something real quick, but anyway, I don't want to use that example. But we must be aware of that too.
That's correct.
Because sometimes we'll fool ourselves and say, well, I'm strong enough to overcome this, and I don't really this or that. But we can put ourselves in that situation, and then we may actually sin.
Yep.
So part of the discipline comes even before the actual committing of the act of something
That's
wrong.
correct. That is correct. Yeah, we have to be aware. We have to be aware. And before we get to that point of no return, see, we have to be aware of our surroundings, where we're at, what we're doing. And, everybody's doing it. Remember, we'd come home and tell Mom, well, everybody's doing it. I think Cassidy had a question, whoever's on that side over there. But you remember that's what we'd say, well, I want to go to the party, everybody's going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. But where's everybody going? Where's the Broadway? I thought somebody had a comment. I do, let's see, Cassidy? Mic's not on? Is the mic on? They can't hear you.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. We're studying David in the ladies' class, and I've just been thinking of a lot of different people throughout the Bible that show self-control, and he's known as a man of war.
That's right.
And he doesn't go against Saul any of the time Saul is trying to kill him, and that probably would have been very easy for him to retaliate and to murder him even when he was coming after him. But he, just thinking of different examples, he's one that stood out, showing self-control. And again, he was known as a man of war. But that's all.
He is one of my examples, if I get down to it.
Okay.
That you think of somebody like that. I mean, he was the king. He was a good king. He slew Goliath, and he had the opportunities, I think, 3 times to kill Saul, but he didn't. But we also remember him for what? His affair with Bathsheba, when he didn't use his self-control. So, but you got to love his repentance. He thought he got away with it. You think about the thing, he murdered Uriah, Bathsheba's husband. And he kind of had it all down on the down low, and Nathan come up and, you are the man. Then he realized, I need to get this right. And you got to love his attitude, how he repented, how he had godly sorrow. You remember he was fasting while the child was still alive. He said, who am I to, I don't know. Will God relent? Will God change his mind? While he's alive, I'm going to fast and pray. And then remember when he passed away and servants didn't want to tell him, oh man, what's he going to do now? He's been fasting all this time. Then when he found out, he said, is the child gone? They said, yes. He says, okay. He got up, got himself dressed, went back to being the king. He had that godly sorrow. He repented. Edie.
Thank you. You were talking about self-control, and then we've talked about cursing, putting ourselves in positions that would tempt us to sin. But I think it has a lot to do, our self-control has a lot to do with just our testimony and what that says to others, setting ourselves apart from the world.
Yep. Because I think a lot of us are ashamed to a certain extent to be out there. And sometimes rightly so, because all the ones that make the news are what? They're zealots, they're fanatics. So we might not want to be considered a fanatic, so we don't talk a lot about Jesus when we're out. Most of us in here are probably retired, but in our workplace, we don't talk a lot about Jesus. And I was just thinking about what Paul said. Well, that's actually in tonight's lesson in Galatians, but if anybody comes to you and teaches anything other than what we've preached to you, let him be accursed. You think about the hundreds, possibly thousands of religions out there. Everybody's got something, but they may ask me a question I don't know. See, so I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to look dumb. So we don't say anything. We keep our religions to ourselves, I don't want to steal my thunder for tonight, but yes, we need to have that boldness. And I don't mean you have to go out there with your Bible and thump people on the head and you're going to hell and you need to repent. I'm not sure how many people are going to get that way. But when you get involved in their lives, and I'm not saying that won't work. Who knows? There's some thick-headed people out there, but they might respond to that. But when you get involved in their lives and you get talking to them and you get to know them, I think your chances might be a whole lot better of converting them. I got just a minute here. Let me see which one of these I want to do. I think I'll do this one. I'm just going to read this because I got a kick out of this. This is the guy that wrote this. And it says, when I was in the first grade, I was bullied day after day. The bully yelled at me, hit me, threatened me, called me names, demeaned me, and even broke my pencils. I lived in daily fear and frustration. Get a load of this. She was the meanest in both words and actions. And I struggled with how to deal with her barrage of angry words and violence. And this is the part that got me. He says, I was stuck between the family rule to never, ever hit a girl and the fear that if I did hit her, she might beat me up. Most of the time when I think of bullies, I think of boys. So I just got a kick out of this. And this girl must have been mean. And he didn't want to go home and tell his dad that the girl beat him up. He thought he was going to get 2 whippings. So he pondered that question. But I have never been bullied. So I really don't know a lot about bullying other than it's not a very good thing. I've never bullied anybody. I was always the class clown, so I was never into the bullying aspect because I'm not the biggest guy and I'm afraid somebody might whip me. So I just used humor as even though I didn't verbally abuse them, let me get that. But you think about Jesus, punched, threatened, lied about, slapped, murdered. How did he retaliate? How did he handle it? Sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. Brother, I'm going to tell you, I couldn't do that. Ain't nothing more detestable to me than spitting and spitting on somebody. That's about as low as you can go. And I think about that, I think it was one of the Roman soldiers when they had him in the praetorium and they slapped him and said, oh, if you're the Son of God, prophesy. Tell me who just hit you. Oh, man, would you like to be him on judgment? Oh, yeah, I remember you. I can't see Jesus doing that either, but yeah, you were the guy that hit me. You didn't think I knew, did you? So that's what I'd be saying. That's why I'm not the Son of God. See? But he trusted in him who would judge righteously, and that's the good Lord. And that's what we got to do. See? When we run into these situations, we need to trust God. We don't need to take vengeance. We don't need to retaliate. We need to trust God. Sharon?
You talk about Christ and his ability to maintain his self-control. His self-control was as strong as his belief in his purpose.
Yep.
And that's where it comes to us. Our purpose as a Christian is to teach the good news of the gospel. The other things that we do to get that done are kind of icing on the cake, I suppose, but the purpose that we have is to teach. And if I recognize my purpose as strongly as I can, trying to be like Christ, then I will be able to maintain my self-control.
And I had talked about that earlier. You know, when you get down to your core values and what you base your life on. And if we based ours on the doctrine, on the life of Christ and on the scriptures, and when we're true to that and we rely on God to deal justly, then we can administer our self-control a little bit better. And brethren, it's not that easy. I just wish I could sit up here and tell you that it's just a piece of cake. You can all do it, and we can all do it. But it's difficult, and it takes practice. It takes practice, practice, practice all the time to be aware and resist the devil. Annie, I think we're probably done, but I'll take your comment off the air. Thank y'all.